Okay, we are reading chapter 13 of Everlost, called Time in a Bottle. Leaf was accustomed to being alone, but there was quite a difference between being alone in a lush green forest and being jammed into a pickle barrel. At first, he felt sure Allie would rescue him right away. When it didn't happen in the first few minutes, or the next, he began to get scared. Then the fear turned to anger, and then the anger itself pickled into resignation. He could hear very little in the brine, and could feel even less. Then, as the days went by, his mind began to play the most amazing trick on him. He was able to forget where he was. The darkness became a starless infinity that stretched into empty space. His spirit filled the emptiness from one end of infinity to the other. This, he knew, is what God must have felt like before creation. A single spirit in a formless liquid eternity. It was a feeling of such power, time itself seemed to stop in its tracks. Leaf felt as if he was the entire universe, and nothing at the same time. So glorious was this sensation of timelessness that he was able to lock himself inside of it just as tightly as he was locked in the barrel. Nick, on the other hand, was miserable. Chapter 14, The Altar Boys. Welcome to Rockland County. It was a road sign Allie was sure she'd never see again. The last time she had seen it, she was pushed into the earth, and if it hadn't been for Leaf and Nick, she wouldn't have made it out. I must be crazy coming back here. Well, crazy or not, here she was. Johnny-O, she called out at the top of her lungs. I want to talk to you, Johnny-O. Allie knew it wasn't just bad luck that had brought Johnny-O and his little team of morons to them that night. The way Allie figured it, any new arrivals in Everlost in this area would follow the main highway and would pass this way. If Johnny-O wasn't here himself, chances are he had a lookout keeping an eye on this very spot, waiting for some poor, unsuspecting green soul to rest beneath the Welcome to Rockland County sign. She figured right. It took a few hours of calling and making noise, but finally word had been relayed back to Johnny-O, and he showed up at around noon. This time he came with a dozen kids to back him up instead of just 4. Nothing was going to scare them away this time. The cigarette was still hanging out of the corner of his mouth, smoldering away, and Allie realized the cigarette was going to be stuck there until the end of time. Hey, it's the girl that tricked you, said the kid with the purple lips and the lump in his throat. Johnny-O hit him. She didn't trick me, he said, and nobody contradicted him. He assumed a kind of gunslinger posture, like this was a showdown. He looked more comical than anything else with his huge hands. I thought I sent you down, he said. You thought wrong. So what? Did you come back so I could send you right down this time? I'm back with a proposition. Johnny-O looked at her, his expression stony. At first, Allie thought he was doing it for effect. Then she realized he didn't know what proposition meant. I want your help, Allie explained. Raggedy Andy tossed his weird red hair out of his eyes and laughed. Why would we want to help you? Johnny-O smacked him, then crossed his heavy arms and said, Why would we want to help you? Because I can get you what you want. By now, even more kids had arrived. Some were real little, others her age, maybe a bit older. They all had menacing scowls, even the little ones. We don't want nothing from you, Johnny-O said, and his chorus of bullies grumbled their agreement. This was all posturing, Allie knew. He had to be curious. If he wasn't, he'd already have pushed her down. You attack green souls for the crumbs in their pockets and pre-chewed gum. Johnny-O shrugged. Yeah, so? What if I told you I knew where you could get real food? Not just pocket crumbs, but whole loaves of bread. Johnny-O kept his arms crossed. And what if I sewed your lying mouth shut? It's no lie. I know a place where salami and chickens hang from the ceiling. A place where you could eat all you want and wash it down with root beer. Root beer? Echoed one of the little kids. Johnny-O threw him a warning glance, and the kid looked at his toes. There ain't no such place. What'd you think I am, stupid? Well, yes, Allie wanted to say, but that's besides the point. Instead, she said, "Have you ever heard of the Haunter?" If the rest of the kids were any indication, they all knew about the Haunter. There were whispers. A few kids backed away from her, and the lump in Purple Puss's throat bobbed up and down like a fishing float. For a second, Allie even thought she could see fear in Johnny O's eyes, but he covered it with a wide grin that tilted the tip of his nasty little marboil to the sky. "First you tell me the McGill is your friend, and now the Haunter." His smile turned into a frown, and the cigarette tipped downward. "I've had enough of you. You're going down." "Send her down," the other kids started yelling. "Down, down." They advanced on her. She knew she only had a split second before a mob mentality took over, and then nothing she could say would save her. "I lied," she shouted. "I lied about the McGill to stop you from sending me down. But this time I'm telling you the truth." Johnny put up his hands, and the kids hesitated, waiting for his signal. The Haunter captured my friends, and I can't rescue them alone. I need somebody strong," Allie said, looking right into Johnny O's eyes. "I need somebody smart." Allie watched the tip of his cigarette. Would it tip up, or would it tilt down? It wavered for the longest time, and finally it tilted upward. "You came to the right guy." They took Allie to the nearest town, the place Johnny O and his band of juvenile hoods called home. Johnny O made a point of crossing the main street several times for no sensible reason. "It's because of the Chinese restaurants," Raggedy Andy explained. "They're supposed to be bad luck or something. At least that's what Johnny O heard. And so they wove a serpentine path down the street, crossing to avoid all 4 Chinese restaurants in town, proving that superstition was not limited to the living. They brought Allie to their hideout. Stupid that they called it a hideout, because they didn't have to hide from the living. You couldn't see them anyway. Like Mary, Johnny O had found a building that had crossed over and had made it home. His was a white clapboard church, which struck Allie as funny. The kid probably never went to a church in his life, and now he was stuck living in one. At least there was some justice in the universe. There were about 30 kids total, all disciples of Johnny O, like he was running a tough guy school. They called themselves the Altar Boys, because they lived in a church, but the way Allie saw it, they were also altar boys. That is, every single one of them had something about him slightly altered from his living self, like Johnny O's hands or Raggedy Andy's hair. "How come there are no girls?" Allie asked. "Girls come by once in a while wanting to join," Johnny O said. "We send 'em packin'." And then he added, "I don't like girls much." Allie couldn't help but grin. "I think you died about a year too young." "Yeah," Johnny O admitted, "and it really ticks me off." Now that she was accepted by their leader, the other kids kept stealing glimpses at her, like she was some sort of exotic creature. Great, she thought, I'm playing Wendy to a delinquent Peter Pan and the Lost Boys of Juvie Hall. She told them all about the pickle factory and the Haunter's air soldiers. "His magic ain't no match for us," Johnny O said proudly. Allie wasn't entirely convinced, but beggars can't be choosers. "The hard part will be getting in. There's a big steel door, not living world steel, but steel that crossed over with the building. I pounded on it for hours and couldn't make a dent." Johnny O wasn't bothered. "That ain't a problem. We'll use explosives." "You've got explosives?" He called to a kid on the other side of the church. "Hey, Stubbs, get your fat butt over here." The kid came running. "A few years back," Johnny explained, "Stubbs here was selling illegal fireworks out of his garage. They caught on fire, and Stubbs won himself a one-way trip to Everlost. Anyways, it turns out part of his fireworks stash came over with him." And then Johnny added, "Which is more than I can say for most of his fingers." "Yeah," said Raggedy Andy, laughing. "That's how come Stubbs can only count to 3. Allie and the Altar Boys left at dawn, the members of the gang all carrying baseball bats, chains, and various other makeshift weapons that had somehow crossed over. They would have been terrifying in the living world, but with the threat of pain and death not applicable in Everlost, it was all pretty much for show. Fashion accessories for bad boys who didn't get where they were going. All the while, as they marched south toward the city, purple pus kept giving Allie dirty looks. Not too long into their journey, he broke his silence. "I don't like this Johnny-O," he said, the bulge in his neck ping-ponging up and down. "She's not one of us. We shouldn't ought to be trusting her." Johnny-O smirked. "Heimlich here don't trust nobody." "For all we know," Heimlich said, "she could be leading us straight to the Sky Witch." "Shut up," said Johnny-O. "There ain't no such thing." "Sky Witch?" asked Allie. Johnny-O waved it off. "Just a stupid story they tell to scare little kids about some witch who lives in the skies over Manhattan." "She devours kids' souls," said another kid. "Yeah," said Raggedy Andy, baring his teeth and hooking his hands like claws. "She grabs you and takes a deep breath, sucking your soul right up her nose. That's why they all call her the Queen of Snot." Johnny-O gave them a Three Stooges-like slap that got all three of them. "What, were you born stupid, or did you just die that way?" He turned to Allie. "Some kids will believe anything." Allie, wisely, said nothing. "We should make her skim," said Raggedy Andy. "That way we'll know whether she's worthy." Johnny-O explained that all prospective members of the Altar Boys had to take a coin and skim it on the Hudson River. If it skimmed at least twice like a stone, then you were worthy of joining the Altar Boys. You had to use a coin you crossed over with, and you only got one chance because once your coin sank, it was gone for good. Allie was confused. "But how can you skim an Everlost coin on Living World water? It wouldn't work. It would just fall straight through." "Well," said Johnny-O with a wink, "I'm the one who decides whether or not I saw it skim." The next morning they came to the George Washington Bridge, which crossed the Hudson into the northern tip of Manhattan. There they halted. Allie looked back to see them all milling around near the on-ramps. "We don't do bridges," Johnny-O said, and Allie smirked. "Are you scared?" Johnny-O narrowed his eyes into a glare. "If you ever try to cross a bridge, you know how easy it is to sink right through it and fall into the river. But I guess you ain't bright enough to figure that out." Allie was about to fire right back at him about how she already crossed this bridge, and maybe his name should be Johnny Zero instead of Johnny-O because he had zero guts. But then Raggedy Andy said, "We lost more than 20 kids once trying to cross the Tappan Zee Bridge. It was awful." Everyone looked down sadly, realizing their shoes were sinking into the road, and began to shuffle around again. "Old news," said Johnny-O, clenching his fists. "But we don't cross bridges no more." Allie swallowed everything she was about to say. She wondered if she, Nick, and Leaf would have sunk through this bridge if they hadn't been wearing their road shoes. "Maybe she is working for the Sky Witch," said one of the little kids. "Maybe she wants us to sink." The others looked at her now with frightened eyes, but the look quickly melded into threatening. "Johnny-O's right," Allie said. "We shouldn't risk it." "We'll take the tunnel," Johnny-O announced, and led the way. Flurries were falling by the time they reached the Lincoln Tunnel 4 hours later. Although there was a narrow service catwalk along the side, Johnny-O led his crew right down the middle of the road, intentionally letting oncoming traffic barrel right through them. The Everlost version of macho, thought Allie. Although she would have much preferred the catwalk, she didn't want to show any sign of weakness, so she walked side by side with Johnny-O, ignoring the annoying sensation of through traffic. By the time they reached the Manhattan side of the tunnel, the flurries had grown into a full-fledged snowstorm, the first of the winter. A violent wind tore at the coats of the living. Snow felt different than rain or sleet as it passed through Allie. It tickled. As for the wind, she felt it, and it was indeed cold, but like all other weather conditions, feeling it and being affected by it were two different things. The cold could not make her shiver, and yet, as unpleasant as it seemed for the living people fighting the snowstorm, Allie wished she could be one of them. But Johnny-O, like Mary, had no interest in the living. Allie wondered how long until she became like that. The going was slow because it seemed every single city block had a Chinese restaurant, and Johnny-O was making them cross the street or turn down the side streets again and again to avoid them. "This is ridiculous," Allie said. "Chow mein does not carry the plague." The next time she refused to cross the street and walked right to the front of Juan Fu's Mandarin Emporium. "Wow, she's brave," said one of the little kids, and so Johnny-O was forced to do the same, just to prove he was just as brave as Allie. When they finally reached the Haunter's place, Allie could tell something was wrong. The steel door that had been so securely sealed now hung wide open and was slightly bent. Johnny O looked to Allie as if she could explain, but she only shrugged. Maybe, she thought, Nick and Lee fought their way out. Johnny O, for all his swagger and big fist boisterousness, wasn't about to be the first one in, so Allie took the lead and cautiously stepped inside. The scene inside was not at all what Allie expected. There was no longer food hanging from the ceiling. Instead, half-gnawed carcasses of roast chickens and pieces of meat lay strewn about the floor. "My God," said Allie. "You said it," said Johnny O. "I haven't seen so much food in 50 years. "You said it," said John. Unable to control himself, he raced forward, and the altar boys followed, grabbing the carcasses and meat off the floor and shoving them into their mouths. There was no need to fight, because there was enough for everybody. "No," yelled Allie. The Haunter, he could be anywhere." But they weren't listening. Allie braced for the moment the Haunter's hollow minions would descend on them, slapping them into barrels. But as she looked around, she realized the barrels were all gone. All that is but one single barrel that sat in the corner of the mess. Allie noticed shredded bits of black cloth mixed in among the scraps of food, and then something else caught her eye. It was a turkey, a big one, a 25-pounder maybe. It was a bird the Haunter had probably ecto-ripped into Everlost right off someone's Thanksgiving dinner table. One thing, though, the turkey had a bite out of it. A huge, jagged bite. It was as if dinosaurs had sunk its teeth into it and ripped it apart. You could still see the teeth marks. What, thought Allie, could leave an awful bite mark like that? Suddenly, her attention was drawn to the single barrel in the center of the room. Someone was inside it, pounding and screaming. She couldn't make out the words, but she recognized the voice. Just hearing it chilled her far more than the blizzard ever could. "Johnny-O, over here," she called. With a chicken in each of his fists and grease dripping down his chin, Johnny-O looked a bit more comical and less menacing than usual. Reluctantly, he handed his chickens to Heimlich with a look that said, "You eat them, you're dead." He came over to the barrel, and both he and Allie knelt down, putting their ears close to the wood. "Who's out there?" the voice inside said. Let me out, and I shall give you whatever you want." It was the Haunter. Johnny-O looked to Allie for direction. She had, after all, led them to the biggest feast of their afterlives, so she was now held in some sort of reverence. "Let me out," yelled the Haunter. "I demand you let me out." Allie spoke loudly enough to be heard through the wood and brine. "What happened here? Who did this to you?" "Let me out," screeched the Haunter. "Let me out, and I shall rip food from the finest restaurants in the living world and lay it at your feet." But Allie ignored him. "Where are the other barrels?" "They were taken." "By whom?" Allie demanded. "By the McGill." Johnny-O gasped. His mouth dropped open in astonishment. His cigarette would have fallen out if it could. "The McGill?" "His ship's in the bay out past the Statue of the Liberty," the Haunter said. "Let me out and I will help you fight him." Allie considered it, but then she looked around. The strips of black cloth were squirming on the ground like snakes. Frantically, they danced about, and Allie realized what the Haunter was doing. Even from within the barrel, the Haunter was trying to bring his air warriors together to capture them. They tried to resemble themselves, but it was useless. The McGill had shredded them far too well for even the Haunter to put them back together again. Allie looked at the barrel and tried to find some compassion for this creature inside, who had so mercilessly imprisoned her friends. In the end, she found her compassion did not reach that far. "Leave him in there," she said loudly enough for him to hear. "Let him stew in his own juices." "No," the Haunter screamed within the barrel, and around the room bones and bird carcasses began to fly like meteors, randomly tossed about by the Haunter's rage. Allie didn't care. She turned to Johnny-O. "Can you and the altar boys come with me?" she said. "I won't be able to fight McGill alone." But Johnny-O backed away. "We got what we came for," he said. "Ain't nothing anyone can do, say, living, dead, or otherwise, that would get me to fight the McGill. You're on your own." And then, almost as an apology, he reached down and grabbed a leg from the turkey that had been bitten by the McGill. He ripped the leg free and held it out to her, almost like a peace offering. "Here, take it," Johnny said. "You deserve it. You deserve to eat, too." And so she did. She dug her teeth into the turkey and relished its flavor. The first flavor she had tasted in all her months here. It was like being in heaven. Yet, as good as it was, it couldn't outweigh the hell she knew she would soon have to face when she tracked down the McGill. She turned to leave, but before she could, Johnny O called to her. "You never told us your name," he said, and then tilted his Marlboro up with a grin. "I got to know if we're gonna tell stories about how we went off. I got to know it if we're gonna tell stories about how you went off to fight the McGill and all." Allie found herself oddly flattered. Johnny O had decided she was worth being turned into a legend. "My name is..." And for a moment she couldn't remember, but the moment passed. "Allie," she said. Johnny O nodded. "Allie the outcast," he said. Allie had to admit she liked it. "That's right." "Good luck," Johnny O said. "Hope you don't get eaten or anything." Allie left and headed toward Battery Park, the tip of Manhattan where she was sure to see the McGill ship if it were still there. She was terrified, and yet at the same time she felt ennobled. Fighting to free her friends had felt like a desperate mission for a lone girl, but now she was Allie the outcast, on her way to battle the McGill. Kids would tell her story, whatever that story might be. This was no longer just a mission, it was a quest, and she was ready.